Hello, everyone, officially to the session of the Embodiment Festival. We're on the second day, and this session's guest is Nir Isterman. Super happy to have him. He's going to talk about your shadow resilience. Nir is a teacher, facilitator, like mainly teaching facilitators actually to work with that. And he does have an online program as well, which is called Shadow Constellations. I'm going to drop the link in the beginning and in the end of the session. He is facilitator of family and systemic constellations, embodied shadow work and body work. So there's really profound stuff coming up, and we're going to squeeze it in the session for you. He also is an international speaker at online events of this kind of things, and he's specialized in working with therapists and facilitators of all kinds. So really very relevant stuff for what we're looking at here in the Embodied Festival, especially for those kind of people who are interested in maybe pursuing a career as a coach. Very, very relevant. I'm thrilled to host you. Let me know if you need anything more, but we had a little chat already. If you guys have any tech questions, feel free to PM me directly in the chat, and I will give it to Nir. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa, and hello, everybody. Good evening, morning, and all the rest. I'm excited to be here with you today. So I'm Nir Isterman. As Vanessa said, I'm a teacher of family constellation, embodied shadow work, and I try to combine the two in a practical, useful way, both for personal and professional lives. Today we will be focusing on resilience from a shadow perspective. It's kind of a big topic, resilience by itself and shadow by itself. I'll try to cover the very bare basics in a few minutes, and then take us into a journey, an experiential journey, with one of our resilience aspects which lies in the shadow, so that we can reclaim it. Before we go there, I would like you to know that we'll have a bit of time for questions at the end. You can write questions in the chat if you want, but I probably won't be able to really relate to them in the meanwhile, only at the end. And something which is always important for me to say at the beginning of each session is that you don't have to do anything, okay? If you don't feel like it, you don't have to do it. You don't have to go through the process, or you can stop in the middle. Or if I invite you to do something and you feel like you want to do something slightly different, it's all okay. I won't be able to hold your hand while you do something different, okay? Take that in consideration. But you never ever have to do anything. And if you feel like you have to do something, take a deep breath. It's probably some pattern coming up. It has nothing to do with what I ask of you, okay? And because my request is, please be free to do or not do as you feel is right for you at the moment. It's been a long day for some of you. Resilience means there is something to be resilient against, right? So there are issues out there and in us. And we want to touch only what we are ready to touch right now. Okay, so with this disclaimer, let us continue into shadow and resilience. I'll start with the easy one, resilience. I won't even try to define it fully, just to say that when we have challenges in life, it could be something which is frightening, which feels like it is endangering our physical safety, emotional, mental, psychological safety, that it makes us uncertain if we can handle it. Then it becomes difficult, because challenges we feel that we're up to, that's, we have to put some energy, and then it will be okay. But the challenges for which you really need resilience are those that it's not clear that we can actually manage, and because they're traumatic in nature, because they touch on some of our personal soft points or blind spots, because usually we could handle them, but just right now we have something making us less full in our power and in our ability to stand withstand something, and then we need more resilience. And we can get into the topic of resilience from the embodied perspective, and there have been already probably a couple of sessions about that, so I won't at all get into that. And we could get into resilience from more psychological and or more energetic levels. Today we look at resilience from the shadow level. All levels are relevant. From all levels we can draw more on our resilience. What do I mean by the shadow? The shadow I consider a space in ourselves, a space in our body, mind, consciousness, into which we put or throw everything which we believe may endanger our belonging to our family, to our tribe, to our culture. And usually we do it at a very young age, and on some level, even on unconscious ages, even before birth, prenatal stages. Some of us sense that I can't be fully accepted in this specific womb. I better cut off a part so that I have a chance of be accepted here and finish this pregnancy alive or well, energetically and emotionally. But the classical shadow is in the young formative years, usually until age of 4, 5, or 7 at the maximum. We just cut off some of our self parts so that we belong, so that we don't own something that people from our family or our tribe can't handle, something that people like us are not like that. Okay, so if we come from a family or a culture which is really about strength and handling things and fighting, and we happen to be soft or weak or kind or gentle, and it's just inappropriate. We won't get respect, we won't get love, we won't get protection, we won't get understanding. We catch on pretty soon and we just cut him off. And then later on in life, we say, I'm strong, just like the rest of my family and the rest of my culture. And I'm resilient and I can handle things because we are that kind of people. However, deeply, deeply buried are some other parts which I miss unconsciously, which I may be drawn to when I see people from the right gender and sex for me. It's a part of what would pull me to them. It's like they have the missing piece. At the same time, it can be very triggering on other people, and where I'll be really wanting to shake them or be aggressive towards them or superior or educating so that they understand that this soft weakness is bad. And you can change weakness or softness for anything. In our family, we're kind and understanding and supportive, and anyone who is strong-willed and just do what they want is unacceptable. In another family, you can be angry. In another family, you can't think about money, or you can't demand things for yourself. And the list continues. Almost anything that can make us human can go into the shadow if so our family and culture demand of us at a very young age. How is it related to resilience? Well, I won't go into a theory. I'll take us into a journey. And hopefully from the journey, we will have both a better understanding, but even more important, an embodied sense of how it could feel different if we do this kind of work. Are you ready? Okay. So this will take the form of in the mind's eye work. So you're encouraged to either stay with your eyes open or close them as you like, but do please stay with your camera open because I get so many cues from your faces to help me direct the flow. Let us take a couple of deep breaths. Notice how we are now. in our body. To what extent do we feel embodied or disembodied? Just notice, no hard feelings, no judgment. How is our breath? Where is the center of our weight right now? Maybe take a moment to notice the sense of our weight landing on whatever it is that we sit or stand or lie on. And how does sensing this weight makes us feel in our body? And now let us take something in our lives which we find difficult to deal with. It doesn't have to be your biggest trauma, okay? It's a very short session. It could be something just happens outside and you're affected by. It could be something more personal, could be a relationship. It could be anything that you feel is appropriate for today. Something that you feel is you don't have to fully crumble when you face it, but you're not fully standing on your feet calmly and feeling safe. Okay? So anywhere in that range is okay. What we'll do now is in our mind's eye, we'll ask our subconscious to supply us with a couple of images. One image to represent ourselves, and one image in the space of our mind's eye to represent whatever it is that we're dealing with, that we are facing. And for a moment, we can just look at those two visual representations from the side, from above, noticing the shape of each one of them. How do we look? How does a representation looks like? How does the representation of what we're facing, what we find difficult to face, looks like? And now let us take our presence or center of presence from the outside and above into our own representation. So we're sort of taking ourselves and connecting with the energy of our own representation. And let's take a moment to notice how that feels. To be ourselves in the presence of that thing. How is our breath, our posture, our sense of weight? Do we feel pulled or pushed in any direction? How present and embodied do we feel? What do we feel emotionally? How emotional are we? Perhaps we can notice our thoughts. Maybe some images comes up in our mind's eye. Memories, scenes. Maybe we hear something, sound, noise, silence, music. And we can also notice how we feel towards the representation of what we are facing. How much space does it take? How much space do we take in relation to it? How safe or unsafe do we feel? What do we want to do with it, or relatively to it? Do we want to move away, to hide, to fight? Do we freeze? Do we get tired? Do we get more alive? And let's take a breath and gently disengage ourselves from our own representation. And we add in our mind's eye a third representation. We ask our subconscious to supply us with a representation for resilience. Simply our resilience, the one we already have, the one we know. Where does it show up in our mind's eye in relation to ourselves and to the representation of what we find difficult to face? Going back into our own representation. How do we feel now? Does this presence of resilience helps us? How? To what degree? Maybe not at all. Just notice. Sometimes the first thing to do is just call the resilience we know we have. It's already an improvement in some cases. And let us step off, so disengage gently from our own representation and move ourselves, our presence, into the representation of our resilience. Noticing how does it feel in the body to be our resilience. How does it feel? Do we feel strong enough, protective enough, capable enough towards this difficult thing? Maybe not so much or not enough. Just notice how it feels. How do we relate as the representation of resilience to the representation of what is difficult for us to face? And it's okay if you're yawning or anything else that you feel. Completely natural. Notice your level of energy, your sense of confidence as your resilience. And then gently disengage. Take a breath. We will now add another representation. A representation for a missing piece, for some part of our resilience, something that our resilience is missing in order to stand straight and tall and powerfully in relation to this challenge, to this difficult to face thing. We ask our subconscious to supply us with another representation, and we place it somewhere behind us, center, left or right behind us, because behind us is where the shadow lies. And then we move into this representation of this missing piece of our resilience which lies in our shadow. Something that we had to disown in order to belong, even without remembering we did it. How does it feel to be this part? How is your body now? Notice if there is any new sensations that you're not used to feeling or not used to feeling in that way. Notice how much space you take, your breathing, your boundaries, your sense of power. Whatever it is, could be something very different. Allow yourself to embody this aspect of yourself to the best of your current ability, and it's okay if it's not 100% or even close. Even if it's just a bit more, notice how it feels. Please step off, slow and gently disengage from this representation. Take a breath. And notice if the four representations we have ourselves, the difficult to face, our conscious resilience, and the piece which was in the shadow of our resilience. Notice if anything feels like changing about them, maybe their position, their relative distance or angle, maybe their visual aspect changes, their size, their color, the shape. Just allow for any change that wants to happen spontaneously. Now let us step into the representation of our resilience. Our resilience that now has that extra bit, extra piece, more present or more connected than before. How does it feel to be our resilience now? How does it feel in the body? Is there a change in how powerful or capable or safe we feel now? If as our resilience we feel like moving somewhere or changing, we can. And then let us slowly disengage and move into our own representation. How do we feel now? With our resilience more whole. How is our posture and breathing and space taking and sense of safety? When we face the difficult to face now, is there any difference? Let's take a moment to notice to what degree we feel that we connect with that piece of our resilience which was in the shadow. Maybe it feels like, oh yeah, of course, it's here. How nice. Maybe it feels like, oh my gosh, it's so difficult, no way. And anything in between. So if you feel unsatisfied with how much you can connect with it, please ask your subconscious to supply a representation for something that can support this integration. And we can have more than one support or resource to do that. One by one, add one. Notice how it feels. If you feel it's enough, good. If you feel more needed, add one more. And another one or two or three. Don't worry about it. We have an endless supply of resources inside our mind's eye, in the wider space. And even if you feel like I will need an endless amount of resources, just see what happens as you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Just notice if something gradually begins to change at some point. For some of us, what would be useful is to ask from our subconscious for a representation of one of our ancestors who knew how it feels like in the body to hold, to own this piece. And this ancestor could be way, way back. Yeah, probably haven't met him or her in person. Just notice what works for you. And when you feel that there is a positive change, even if not complete, it's a good time to stop. Notice if the representation wants to move, to change in some way. Noticing how we feel in the body. How do we feel with the piece which is or was in the shadow? Maybe now in partial shadow. Noticing how are we now with the representation of what is difficult to face. And we'll do a couple, 2 more steps. The first one is to add a representation for what is so difficult for us in that difficult to face. And put it next, place it next to the representation of what is difficult to face. Like the heart of the difficulty. What is in there which is so difficult? And still staying in our representation, we can just notice if the difficulty is still towards the original representation or has it mostly moved towards the heart of it. And if it is moved mostly towards the heart of the difficulty, then we can add the second representation. This one is for an aspect of this heart of the difficulty that we disown. Maybe my difficulty is that the other person is a narcissist. Okay, I'll put a representation for just a bit of narcissism in me. A vaccine, if you like. If the difficulty is violence, I'll put a representation for a bit of violence which I disown, because we all have some of this as well. Just notice what happens when we add the second representation, acknowledging it as belonging to us as well. How does it affect our relationship with what is difficult to face or the heart of the difficulty? If anything, again, wishes to move or to change in our mind's eye, in the representations, their shapes, their forms, their color, their relative placement, allow it to happen naturally. If you feel intuitively that you would like to add something more, you can do that, but we will finish in a moment, so only if it comes very naturally. From your representation, notice how all the other representations are organized in their final positions. Notice how you are now with yourself and in relation to what is difficult to face. Is there a difference in respect to how we began this journey? How does it feel now in our body? And gently we disengage from our representation and from this entire constellation in the mind's eye. We can take a couple of slow, mindful breaths, gently allowing that space to dissipate, but the changes to remain. And slowly bringing ourselves to the here and now of this Zoom lesson. Thank you for taking the journey. Would you like to share in the chat or by asking to talk? How are you? If you have any questions, anything you would like to share about the process? Christina, please. Vanessa, can you allow Christina to unmute?
Apologies, there we are. Busy with the chat.
Yes. Thank you so much. It feels like it's helpful to really verbalize and let it through. So I felt a lot of change in the back of my back, in my back. It was all happening behind me. And it felt like the ancestors standing behind me, except one. I didn't want him there because it was too dangerous. So there was kind of a shift in that quality of allowing to be supported from behind. And definitely a shift in the solar plexus area in the back. Yeah, so I'm very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing, Christina.
Mm.
Thank you. I quickly read it. For some of you, it was meaningful, and for some of you, it was also difficult or raised some difficult emotions. Just to say it can happen in such a short session for sure. But if you feel that in another few hours or a day you feel something better stayed with you, please get in touch with me and I'll help you to undo something or add something that needs to be done. Okay, don't go out feeling worse, please. Melissa, please.
Hi there. Thank you for that. I sometimes feel I have this challenge with the word resilience because I think there's been so much endurance in my life, and I liked the aspect that you brought up, the different parts, and I'm feeling a different support and relationship to that resilience for me, because it's not just the part of like, you'll be resilient and you'll keep going, but really sitting in the middle of the body with the different pieces that can help to be those supports instead of this internal revolution that I get on. So I appreciate that. And I had a lovely deep connection in my mind with an old teacher of mine who I just learned past, I think, from doing this. I was like, oh, he's not with us anymore, but it's somebody that I've carried teaching up. So even thinking of that person and their teaching in my life, and how I carry that lineage, and really that representation of resilience in me.
Sounds good. Thank you. For those who felt sleepy, please don't feel bad. One of the common shadow triggerings is actually falling asleep or yawning or feeling it's difficult to keep our eyes closed. it's much more common than people tend to think. And many times when we feel tired, we're unaware, but we're actually shadow triggered and not really tired. As we'll find out, if in 5 minutes a friend will call us, like, hey, how are you? Suddenly the tiredness is gone, because it's relational and situational very often, and not really very physical tiredness. Yeah.
I think
Any-
we have time for one more share or question.
Please,
Raise a hand.
questions are welcome.
Of course, it's quite intimate, right? It's really delicate. You find the contact to Neil's page in the chat. There's Paris.
Yes, thank you so much. I came late and dropped immediately in. It was lovely. My question would be, I'm with this question for a while now, and I'm glad I can ask you about it. There is a lot of misunderstanding and misconception around the distinguishment between shadow and evil, dark, evil / dark, and shadows. If you can elaborate a little bit about that.
Okay.
Bring clarification.
I quickly try. Very often what is in our shadow, we consider it to be immoral. And because in our culture it is considered so, or in our family. Very often we feel like there is something evil inside of me, because otherwise, how can they not love me if it's not evil? So that's the shadow aspect. True evil, whatever exactly that means, is not necessarily in the shadow. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's out there open. We see it in wars very easily. And sometimes it is in the shadow, and then we see people who really try to be good, but do horrible things, evil things, because they're not in touch with that as well. To answer it more fully, more than just more time, I would need to discuss the definition of evil, because definition of shadow is relatively easy to understand, but the definition of evil has been very slippery for many generations of philosophers and priests. So just to say that the fact that something is horrible does not mean it's evil. The fact that something feels evil does not mean it's evil. But personally, I do believe there is such a thing as evil, and that it's a more than human thing. It's like it's more than a personal thing. It's bigger. If we have God, then we have the other extreme as well in this polarized version of reality. I hope that was helpful, as short as it is. Yeah, so thank you for taking the ride today, and you're welcome to get in touch if you have any questions, if you're interested in Shadow Constellation work or training, or as I said before, if you feel that you slipped into a hole during that session and you need a hand getting out of the hole, then please let me know as well. I'll do my best. Yeah, take care, enjoy the rest of the festival, and I hope to see you in one form or another. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a very touching and beautiful session and exercise. And I think when I look into the chat, then many people share this experience. So thank you so much for your time and for your knowledge and for sharing what you do with us. And yeah, great to have you here in the Embodiment Festival. So for everyone else, let me stop the recording quickly.